nothing has to last forever. Even a dream, it could be a temporary thing, and it matures into something else. And that was quite nice to know that, really. It's okay to go off and try things and come back and try something else and have a revised view. And I in many ways now I celebrate that aspect of myself, that I had the courage.
Okay, shall we start with how you grew up?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I grew up in a small mining town in the north of England. You can probably hear from my accent that I've got a bit of a northern inflection. It was a mining town until the 80s. So I lived there from the 70s, and the mines were closed in the 80s under Thatcher. I won't go into detail about the miners' strikes, but I do remember going to the mine. My mother used to work there in the canteen, in the kitchen. I used to go there for lunch.
Coal mine?
Coal mine, yeah. So the whole community was based around the coal mine.
In Yorkshire?
In Lancashire, yeah, Lancashire-Cheshire border. But yeah, as I grew up, I kind of got interested in technology. I got a computer when I was in my teens, and that's when home computers were first emerging. I had a ZX Spectrum, which some people may remember as one of the first kind of home computers, and I just got lost in that. I just found it fascinating. I love the idea that you could kind of interact in worlds that people had made for you, and I just kind of fired my imagination. Now, obviously, looking back at the kind of games they had then they're kind of very primitive compared to what we play now. But there was just something magical about that, and that's kind of what led me into a career in technology. Now, as a child, I think one thing that influenced me quite a bit, and one thing that I still work on, is I think my voice was kind of suppressed, and I think that's probably true for many children, where children are quite outgoing, but there was a certain amount of discipline around, how far you can go to be heard, and I'd often be told to, limit that and not be so loud.
By your parents or at school?
Yeah, by my parents. It was mainly around, I shifted to move in with my step family after my parents divorced when I was quite little, and I think I was quite an outgoing child, but I think that was viewed as being a bit untoward, and so...
Just in that family, or do you think it's kind of a broader thing of the culture of the North or something like that?
Well, it's a good question, and I think there's probably the family had a lot to do with it, but I think it was a working class family, and in a working class family there are probably certain ways of being, and maybe that's not an unfair generalization, but it could have been friction with my stepfather, because I remember my grandparents, and I was very close to my uncle, and they kind of encouraged me to perform and to play act. So it was in contrast, I think, really to the way my stepfamily was. And I always remember that, because I think in my teaching, I talk about the openness of children and the way that they communicate and how it is suppressed. And I think I fell victim to that. And I can't say it was a particularly... it was happy in some respects, but it was also tempestuous in others. There was, the arguments between my mother and my stepfather, and that would make me a bit nervous. And I think that was something that continued. And because of that, I started to hide away a little bit, and I started to feel a bit anxious around, my stepfather and my so the lights have just gone off in this office, which I completely forgot that would happen. So if I move around a little bit, or you just carry on.
Yeah.
The moody lighting. Yeah, it made. I think it's probably common to be surrounded by conflict as a small child can make you kind of nervous, and to then avoid conflict.
Would it get violent?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. There'd be hitting, so that affects you quite a lot. So actually, as a child, I was quite nervous and shy.
And would you get caught up in that?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I would. That was part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Were there other children in the household?
There were, yeah. So I had my siblings, my step brother, my stepsister for a small period, although she moved away. I do have a real brother, but when my mum and dad split, he went with my dad, and I went with my mum. So, but I suppose the important thing here is that children are born quite open, and when you are faced with conflict and a certain amount of what you feel is quite violent and an actual hitting, you can withdraw, and I did, and it affected me in that I became quite shy. Not only shy, but quite. It affects your self-esteem massively, and it also affects how you relate to others. So I would be very affected if I felt somebody didn't like me. It's like I invested my well-being in others. So I became very sensitive to how people were. And these are things that I kind of bring now into into my teaching, because I recognize that this is something. It's not just me that goes through this experience, but this sense of worthiness and the sense of the ability, how far you can go in terms of self-expression, is very much determined by what happens to you as a child. I mean, obviously, this is what therapy is based on. So,
was it obvious to you that was having an impact on you at the time, or did you realise later in life?
I think it was later that I became more objective. There were epiphanies, as you get older and you start to mature and you start to talk about these experiences, the way you start to realise that it impacts you, and it has become a lifelong project, I think, to not only for me to overcome it, but to try and bring that into my teaching to help other people. So, I remember the idea of presenting, the idea of standing up in front of others, the idea of being the centre of attention was kind of terrifying, because I was raised not to to do that, and the impact of the conflict that I experienced as a child made me more withdrawn. So I found, although I had really good friendships, I have to say, but I found solace in those friendships, and I had this is like not 100% of the time. With other members of my family, I had great relationships too, and I found solace there. But the experiences inevitably impacted, my personality.
Mm-hmm. Was it like an alcohol-fueled thing where you could kind of know if something was going to happen, or it was?
It's interesting you asked that, because yes, there were occasions when alcohol played a role, absolutely. The one thing about, Britain generally, but growing up in the Northwest, alcohol is a fabric of the culture, and it kind of still is to a certain degree. But I think adding alcohol to the mix, it made the people drinking it more volatile, and so that added an extra level of panic, knowing that had somebody been drinking and knowing that I'd experienced them whilst drunk. Well, obviously I was too young to be drinking. It became quite a fearful experience, actually, because they would lose their inhibitions, and there were times when it would be unpleasant.
And did you get on with your step siblings?
Not so much. No, that was another thing. I think I was quite different to them. I mean, I was quite shy and generally just I don't know, quite happy-go-lucky child, and unfortunately the step sibling relationship developed into conflict again, and I was a bit more academic than they were. I was more into school. I was achieving a bit more. They didn't like that, and we just didn't really get along. I was taken into this new environment with this step family, so yeah, I struggled with that, and I had that additional conflict to deal with my step siblings. Yeah.
What did your stepdad do? Sorry, I have so many questions. Always. I'm like, what did your stepdad do? What did your dad do? What was your relationship like with your dad?
Yeah, what did he do as a profession? My stepdad was a painter and decorator initially, though he moved into different things. He bought a fish and chip shop, and he would do like building work, things like that. But yeah, when I first met him, he was a painter and decorator. He used to do houses. My dad was a surveyor for the council, and I didn't see him a lot. Saw him occasionally. If anything, I had a probably closer relationship with my uncle, who was he worked in chemistry. I'm not quite sure what he did, but he was a really lovely guy and very influential on me, I think, because he was so lacking in judgment. He would just take things as they were. I mean, he encouraged me to study. He was very focused on academic achievement, and that was good because I was, I had some ability there, so it was nice to have that kind of understanding, and it makes a big difference when you have an adult who is showing you empathy.
Sorry, go on.
No, well, I'm not saying I never got that at home, but it was just constant, really,
And that's your mum's brother?
It's my dad's brother. Yeah.
And everyone was in the same town?
Pretty much. They're small towns, they're neighbouring towns, but they were within a few miles of each other, pretty close. Yeah.
My brothers went to school in Lancashire, actually.
Did they?
Near Clitheroe. So
Clitheroe, right.
We would go up a fair bit, but
yeah.
It's so beautiful up there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really realise at the time, but I was kind of living in the country, and now I'm living in a big city. When I go up there and I see how sparse it is and how much countryside there is around there, I realise I was living in the country. But and I enjoyed that, that aspect of it. And I've got to say, I've got so many happy memories of growing up there. But I think that obviously the conflict that I experienced in the step family had such a big impact on me that it's something I'm still, working on to this day.
And I guess the mood would have been quite depressed if so many people were losing their jobs from the mines.
Well, yeah, towards the 80s, it got a bit gloomier. But then again, that's something I wasn't really aware of, because for me, as I was growing up in the 80s, I became much more aware of culture. And I remember Channel 4 appeared, and that was a revelation because it was full of arts programming and obscure films and things that you wouldn't ordinarily see. And I kind of gravitated towards that. It was fascinating to me, this kind of experimental kind of media and just new ideas, alternative comedy. That was quite exciting, and interesting music started to emerge. So yeah, I've got a lot of happy memories around the kind of music and culture that I experienced in the 80s, and I wasn't really part of the kind of socio-economic political landscape. I didn't watch the news. I was much more into kind of like watching things on TV. So I'd often watch things in my room alone because I had a portable TV, so I'd kind of step away from the family, and I had quite a solitary sort of experience of TV culture. Although I would share it with my friends, I had a good network of friends. So.
And you had a happy time at school.
Yeah, more or less. It was fine. It was okay. I can't say it was too troublesome. There were good and bad times, but it was fine. I wouldn't say it was successful in as much as I wanted it to be. I did okay. It got me to university eventually, but a few challenges along the way to get the grades I needed. But I think that because of my friends network, that was what made it good. So.
And what idea did you have for what you'd do after school?
Well, because I got into computers, I just thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I wanted to do computer science at university. I think at that age it's hard to pinpoint exactly what you're going to do. I was comfortable with computers. I was fascinated by them. I was intrigued by them. It was just something that I felt actually had a creative element to it. And I just thought, yeah, this is the way to go. This is going to get me out into the bigger world. So it wasn't difficult for me. Having said that, there was part of me that liked art and liked reading. But one of the things, which is a real shame actually, I think when I came to do my A-levels, I did want to do things like, I was interested in philosophy. I wanted to do that kind of thing. But there was a kind of message of, no, focus. Stick to the sciences, don't get distracted. And I think that was a shame.
Coming from school or family?
A bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. Like, I remember having a discussion when I was choosing my A-levels at college, and they were like, no, don't do those. Just focus. And there was a certain element of that, like a sense of frivolity around doing things which weren't vocational. And I think that's part of the culture as well. It's like, it's a waste of time. Why would you study that? Which I think is a shame, because I think young minds open to studying these things, they will find their way. And I think I felt, I think I've worked on regret a lot, and I'm fascinated by regret because it's a terrible thing to have, because there's nothing you can do about the past, but it kind of haunts you sometimes, and it's hard to overcome that. And I look back on these decisions, and I think that, what did I know at the time? I decided to do what I did to the best of my ability, and that's kind of, I have to accept that. But at the time, it would have been nice to have had those extra options to explore a bit more. But
you can learn about it now as well.
Yes, exactly. There is only the now. I guess that's the thing. And the other thing I want to mention that I was interested in, and I gravitated towards this in my teens. It was magic. And I mean like the occult magic, not like magic tricks.
What do you mean?
Well, it was really interesting. I was in a physics class, and one of my physics teachers was talking about astral projection. I don't know if you've heard of this, the idea that you have like an astral body and it can leave your body and travel. And I thought, wow. I mean, aside from whether it's how dubious that belief might be, it just completely fascinated me, the idea that there was more possible. There's more possible in the world offered than the material world offered. And I went to my local library, and I would lap up these books on magic and like the supernatural, and I'd be like fascinated by it. And I still am, in a way. I mean, I've come to kind of understand it in different ways, but I would find that extremely interesting.
How have you come to understand it? Because I'm really interested in, I mean, maybe not from the magic side, but from like consciousness and like manifestation. We talk about it a lot on this podcast, which can either be like some cringe thing, or it can just be a bit, and then it comes in with faith, and it's like it can help you live your life in a more I feel like a lot of people, spiritual stuff, it's like a lot of people access it coming from depression or something like that, because because otherwise you're like nihilistic, like what's the point in anything? But then if you find meaning and stuff, and then you can play, ask for signs and like see things and coincidences that don't make sense. And
yeah, that's right. I mean, signs, fascinating, because I say there are very few people that don't say that they have found signs and indicators and signposts. It happens all the time. And if you're open to seeing these things, now some would say, look, these things are just always there. You just notice what you're looking for. But so yeah. I mean, the whole idea that there is just a material world and it functions just like that. Okay, fine. But even quantum physics is starting to introduce notions of consciousness and how consciousness may influence how we experience the world around us. And, the fact that consciousness is something that we haven't demystified, and that the reality is something that is essentially something that our brains invent in accordance with radiation that's coming from outside of us. The sight, sounds, all of this kind of stuff. And obviously working as a voice teacher, knowing that sound is essentially just vibrations in the air, but the way that it affects us is much more profound. And so magic presents this idea of the universe as having some kind of underlying mechanism whereby things essentially working on yourself and your own ability to, the way you can think can start to affect the way around you. Now, this is magical thinking in a way, and magical thinking we have to be careful of, because it can, if taken to the wrong extreme, it can implicate people in saying that they invite things upon themselves. And we have to be careful of that sort of thing. But one of the things that was a real eye-opener for me is, as I was reading all of these occult books, looking at the images and all of the there's a lot of religious imagery.
Wait, what are the books?
Occult books. So like, I don't know if you ever heard of Aleister Crowley. He was a Victorian magician, poet, and he was very, very influential. And he wrote many, many books on the occult and the Western mystery tradition. I didn't think we'd be getting into this, but there's this whole kind of belief system around magic and rituals. And I was fascinated by the idea of ritual and what ritual is and how it can influence us. And
interesting. Does this get into like witch stuff as well?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely one of the sort of disciplines around magical practice, but it's fascinating in that one of the interpretations of it, and this is something that I was written in a book, which was written a long time ago, is that the idea of these external spirits and whatnot is really just a metaphor for parts of the mind. So the idea that you could conjure a spirit and it could teach you a language wasn't really what was happening. What was really happening is that somehow this ritual would stimulate some part of your brain, which would make it more conducive to being able to develop a certain skill. Now, if you think about a lot of hypnosis and hypnotherapy, you start to see where this kind of has some credibility, because what you're doing there is trying to access your subconscious to influence your behavior. So that's, if you make the connection there, it doesn't seem quite as ridiculous. And what the magical teaching is saying is that you could go through some ritual process through the right symbols and colours and so on, abstract, essentially, representations to start to stimulate some aspect of yourself. And it's on the magical thing is kind of a more extreme. It's quite tied in with religion, really, and all the kind of mystical ideas around religions, like all religions have their mystical kind of branch where they start to model the universe and all of the things that are going on. But in a modern approach, you do start to see some overlaps, especially with the way neuroscience, models part of the brain, and how we have neural pathways which can be modified by regular habits, and I suppose in a way it could be viewed as a very ancient means of self change. And that's kind of more my modern interpretation, is that it's now you believing in demons. That's a very different thing, but seeing them as kind of representations of aspects of ourselves starts to get a bit more interesting, and that's where these old ideas start to have some kind of use and utility. And with modern kind of shadow work and Jungian psychotherapy, and Jung himself wrote extensively on magic and the occult and the symbols of the occult and what that could mean, and the tarot cards, all these kind of archetypal images, the idea of the elements from the Greeks, all of this stuff you can kind of see modern counterparts that don't demand superstitious belief necessarily. I mean, I'm making big leaps here.
Oh my God, I love this stuff. Yeah, no, because I've had my therapist on this podcast who I do the part therapy that I was telling you about, internal family systems. So it's like through the subconscious, you access these parts of yourself, which is like people know the ego or inner child, and yet even, it's like talking about someone's demons, but actually this model is there's no bad parts. All parts are you don't demonize them, because if you demonize them, they, everyone knows if you try and you have a bad habit and you try and restrict it or something, but this thing is so powerful and it will just make you eat all the donuts or whatever it is. So it's so, anyway, but through hypnosis, I've experienced these things that are crazy, images and stuff coming to me, ancestral type stuff, messages from, I don't know if it's bullshit, it could be bullshit, but I'm not making it up. I experienced that. So my brain came up with these images and these stories and stuff that's so vivid. And even my brother who's passed away, he's I've had interaction, and it's not a planned medium thing of it's oh, now we're going to access someone from the other side. It's no, it's going through these things, and then these, I guess, spirits or whatever it is will come, and it's a real, it's that's my experience. So, and I don't have some agenda to make this stuff real, because I'm a very logic based science person. So, but all I can say is yeah, that's, and yeah, so it's why the brain does that. Yeah, we don't know, but that's the point. We don't fully understand consciousness. We don't even know where it is. It doesn't exist in our head. It's beyond that. So it's
yeah, that's really interesting, because what you're experiencing there, coming from within, not things that you're consciously choosing to experience. And what are they? What does it mean? How do we then kind of encode that experience to integrate it into ourselves? And it can be scary. I think that's, obviously, some people find a shortcut to this experience through the use of psychedelic drugs and the unpreparedness, and that's why it can be terrifying. But I think through the right avenues, it can be enlightening, it can be fascinating. And then you start to understand where these ideas of angels and demons come from. Are they just aspects of our psyche that are somehow personified? Is it because when we dream, we experience people and these narratives and these behaviors, and they're represented to us, not necessarily in words, but in these images. And the subconscious kind of delivers us these things, and there's something going on. So in like you say, through modern therapies, they kind of embrace these things, and I think they should. Like even in acceptance and commitment therapy, where they talk about inner voices, and to try and distance yourselves from this negative voice, give it an appearance. You know, there's the idea that you give it this name, you give it an appearance, you kind of separate it, so you feel like it's a demon essentially. There's no, what's the difference between that and the old occult teachings of summoning demons? It's kind of what you're doing. You're creating a thought form, and it's emboldening you to realize, well, wait a minute, I recognize that this exists within me. I'm fleshing it out with all these details, but by shining a light on it and giving it a personality, I'm able to kind of distance itself. It's not just me. It's something at work within me. The many programs, the many aspects of our consciousness, and so we can then live with it a bit better, and rather than battling and feeling that there's something wrong with me. It's one of the many dimensions of human consciousness. It's really fascinating.
And that's the point as well, on how you said you can't change the past, but through using these tools you can access, you can go back to that version of yourself who needed something and probably desperately needed love, or to be told it's safe. I mean, not that you didn't get love, but to be told like it's safe, and so you can do that through using neuroplasticity to like nurture parts of yourself that need something, and then it's like, in a way, it like heals the past, and it's crazy because then you're not carrying that around with you. Like, I've had to heal so many things from my past, like 4-year-old versions of myself that affect how I behave today, but then by healing them, it's like changes the present, and it's like so powerful.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because you don't, it's like somebody turning the air conditioning off. You don't know it's working and it's operating until it goes away, and it's transforming. All of the invisible operations that have become unconscious now, and that affect how we operate, to whether you do it through therapy or whether you do it through physical practices or whatever, however you find it. And I've no doubt that some people do find these through more kind of mystical practices. Remember, meditation is born from a more mystical tradition, but it's obviously finding utility now in the modern world, and it's been proven scientifically to be valuable. So there's an example of something from an old teaching which has been shown to be of use. And the more we experience the mind, and the more we open it up to what and to try and recognize that we are so heavily influenced by our early period of development, and we can find ways to, because obviously in voice teaching I talk about that, because the voice becomes the habitual voice rather than the natural voice and the power that we have available to us. But it's not just the power that we have available to us in the voice, it's the power that we have available to us in all other aspects of our expression and our thought. So yeah, it's and nobody's immune to this. We've all experienced things which determine who we are, and not just in our minds, but in our bodies, very much so. Our posture, how we hold ourselves, the tension in our muscles, all that. Books like The Body Keeps the Score, they talk extensively about this, and so we have to recognize that it's the mind body, that thing it's a historical record of all these experiences. And then as we grow up, we start to recognize, well, actually, how do I heal? And this is great. The conversations around trauma with Gabor Mate starts to acknowledge the experience trauma has, and whether it goes, because it can manifest through addictive behaviours, and that again is a fascinating field about what do we constitute as addiction, and now we're starting to understand more the effect of trauma on how we behave, and ultimately, I guess we just want to be freer and more content as human beings, so we can feel that we're being authentic. Not always happy. That you can't be happy all the time, but authenticity, I think, is what we're looking for, isn't it? It's that sense of, yes, I'm doing something of value. I don't know if you ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, and that it's one of the books I always remember, and it's fiction, but he just talks about this idea of value, and using the motorbike, the repairing and of it, doing it yourself, having value, having investment in something, taking the scenic route, not the functional. That we live in a very utilitarian society now. It's all about shortcuts, quick, get there quick, get there fast. In fact, I've done that. What's the next thing I need to do? But the idea of this in-the-moment experience of something, having that value, it comes through in the, if something's being made with value, with real sense of engagement, kind of comes through in it. Whether it's, a bit of furniture, or whether it's a bit of music, or, that real engagement, that sort of sense of, right, I'm going to take my time over this. Why am I talking about this? But I think that... I remember him talking about this idea of value, and I think that sense of being able to express what is valuable to you. That what are your values, and how do you express them, and getting to the heart of how would you like to feel your life should be lived, and voice work for me is part of that, because it enables clearer communication and enables more expression. But yeah, I think that we are living in a world that can often pull us away from ourselves in terms of being able to just be satisfied with what we have to a certain degree, or just we live in a capitalist society which works to a degree, but the need to grow, the need to buy more, the need to consume gives us this kind of anxiety. And I was listening to a really interesting interview with David Foster Wallace, the novelist who sadly took his own life when he was quite young. But it's a great interview, and he was just talking about now how we, when faced with like nothing to do, or we just have nothing in front of us, people have this sense of dread. It's like the anxiety that builds in us when we, that's why we have to get our phones out, or we have to occupy ourselves, or flip on the TV. And I think it's because the anxiety is a symptom of needing stimulation, because we have been addicted to dopamine. So the addiction has become, it's not just about drugs anymore, it's about behavioural addiction. And the problem with that is it can stand in the way of this value experience of doing. How many times have people sat for 2 hours and just worked on something, and the joy and the experience and the depth and what that reveals to you, and now it's quick, has to be quick, or I've got a message. And it just kind of, it's not easy to do this kind of thing, because you will feel anxious, just because you're not getting a reward. It's like, this isn't so much fun. I want my reward. I want my social media message. That's, my brain is firing some dopamine. That feels better. It's like the cigarette has become a digital experience in a way. But I think that experiencing anxiety as something, as actually a fruitful thing, where you can just embrace the anxiety, and you sometimes use it as a signal that you're actually maybe doing something of value. That's become something recently I've become fascinated by.
Cool. Okay, wait, so what's your path to voice teaching?
Sorry. Yeah. Massive digression.
No, it's great, it's great. But I want to get to the voice teaching the part, because then it's so interesting, because some of these things you're saying, I'm like, that's it with what you were saying earlier before we started recording about finding the balance between doing your work in tech and doing the acting or the voice stuff. And that is about filling your life with things that are meaningful, right? Rather than this like end goal. Like when you can switch from like chasing that. Because that's kind of how we're set up from school. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? But then at some point it's like, either you just keep making up arbitrary next things, or you're like actually enjoying the present moment of your life.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of experienced that when I graduated from university, and I got a job for like a big company as a computer programmer.
In London?
It was in Nottingham, actually. Yeah. I kind of panicked. I saw my whole life stretching out ahead of me, and I saw people that had been in the same job for 40 years, and I was like, is this it? And I really did panic a little bit. Luckily, I was very lucky to find a way out, because I then badgered my way into doing a PhD at Nottingham University. At that time, virtual reality was getting a bit exciting and starting to emerge. And that was really cool. This whole idea of cyberspace, and I started to study something that had an overlap with that, and I loved it, because just being in that academic environment, it was more freeing, it was more creative, and it was just, this is when I started to question my choices, because I started to think, well, this is kind of more fun than just straight out programming. This is really interesting, stimulating. But anyway, one thing led to another, and I stayed with the university, and I worked as a researcher, and I collaborated with a group of artists called Blast Theory, who were doing amazing work. They were doing this kind of mixed reality stuff where they were projecting computer graphics onto shower water spray, and performers were walking through as if they were coming out of the virtual world, and this kind of stuff. And it's kind of a pivotal moment where they let me perform. And I thought, oh, wow, this is amazing. I don't need any machines. I just need my body. That's all. And I suddenly thought, this is fascinating. And I'd always had a certain amount of respect for acting, because I think the idea of being able to adapt yourself to a different character and to experience the world as that character, that's that kind of meta level where you can kind of jump into different people was really interesting, how people could do that. And so that kind of triggered my interest in acting. So one thing led to another. I did like acting in the evening.
So you were programming for them, and then they...
Pretty much, yeah. I was doing all the tech. I was like supporting the software, and they just said, let's let him perform. I think I did a terrible performance, because I was grinning the whole time, which I think back now, I thought, bit of an amateur.
But it was something you wanted to do.
But I was curious to do it, but I was kind of scared. But they were great, and they gave me that opportunity. It was for 5 minutes. It was hardly anything, but just having a taste of it, I thought, wow, this is something I want to explore further. And so I did evening classes in acting in Nottingham, and had some great teachers. And when I finally moved to London, again for a programming job, I continued to pursue acting, and it took off.
And it was just for fun initially when you started?
Yeah, I guess I just loved it. I just enjoyed it. I loved the whole thing of getting together with other people, that doing the physical stuff. I started to come out of my shell a little bit, and I just started to get into reading the plays, and I found the writing interesting, and just the whole idea of rehearsing. And to be honest, my first performance, I was absolutely terrified. And
what was it?
It was a monologue from a Stephen Berkoff play. That was my first proper performance that I did, and I was terrified all day. But afterwards, just felt elated. And this is another thing, that you have to do these things. I just keep. If the initial drive is there to kind of get involved in something, go with it, and then see where it takes you. And I've got to say, I don't know if the stage fright has ever left me. I think that's part of the reason why I haven't done as much acting, because I felt it got in the way too much. I don't think I ever conquered it in the way that I would have liked to, but then again, I don't know if anyone does. But yeah, I just love the whole experience. And then came to London, which is like full of opportunities for acting. Did acting in various colleges, and people were applying for drama schools. I thought, yeah, why not? But I never thought in a million years that I would be able to go to drama school, because I thought financially I wouldn't be able to go to drama school, but it just kind of happened. And I went to drama school and did a year as a kind of a mature student.
How old were you at that point?
37, I think I was, yeah. So pretty late by acting standards.
And did you feel like worried about, or did people in your life have opinions about it, or it was just like...
Yeah, I think my parents didn't really know what I was doing. I was in London. They just thought I was doing my regular job. When I said I was going to school, they were like a bit quizzical, but they didn't really understand what was going on. I was still doing some work part-time to keep up my income a little bit. But yeah, they were sort of, I don't know, they didn't quite register.
Were you, what about at work? Like, were you open about that you did acting and people...
Yeah.
Whatever?
Yeah, I had good friends. They'd come to see my shows. And I did a show at the City Lit, which is where we met. And they would come and see... But they'd find it fun. They'd love it that I was involved in these things, because they get to meet other people, and it was quite a sociable thing. So yeah, it was good. It was quite positive. The whole thing was very positive, really. And it was only when I left drama school and I tried to work as an actor that stuff got real, and it became like, wow, this is kind of hard now. I've got to try and get work, and work might mean just like a few minutes, a few seconds in an advert, and it was the realism of it kind of hit me, and I thought, this isn't really why I got into this.
Huh. What? Because it just becomes clear. It's like, okay, I need to make money, and
yeah,
what's gonna pay?
Yeah, I needed to make money. I mean, I had a flat that I had a mortgage on, and I had responsibilities there. So yeah, I needed to make money, and I did what was probably the worst job I've ever done, which was theatre and education, where you tour schools and you do a play. I loved the kids' reaction. I loved the whole kind of performance element, but the reality of it, the logistics of getting up at 5:30, travelling to the schools, setting the set up. There were only two of us. A huge set would take about 45 minutes. Sometimes we'd have to do 2 of those a day. In fact, normally we'd have to do 2 a day. It kind of hit me pretty hard. And I was never an early riser. I'm still not. So, yeah, the reality was very different to the idea, and it soon became apparent to me that actually I don't know if this is a great lifestyle change for me. The idea that you could just walk into like a BBC drama or walk into perform at the National or the Globe. No.
Because it's like so ultra competitive, and it's like you have to know the right people or be in the right kind of networks or something.
Yeah, I think you've got to. Well, it's harder. It is harder when you start older, I think. If you've got like a legacy of a career behind you, not to say that people don't make it in acting. It's harder. I had a very low opinion of my acting ability, to be honest. I didn't think, because of the nerves, I felt it very hard to kind of relax in front of the camera or stage. Not as bad, and I had some really good moments, but generally, I don't know. I think I was deterred by my lack of success initially, and I just felt, oh, this isn't working out, and I don't really have the time to hang around because I've got bills to pay. If I'd gone all or nothing, maybe things would have been different. But then I think, like, what was the judgment of success? What if I got a part in EastEnders? Would I have really wanted to do that? I don't know. Would have I enjoyed it that much, really?
What would have been your dream
Doctor Who. That's what I wanted to be, or like a regular appearance in Shakespeare at the Globe, or things like that. Things like really interesting performances in theatre. Being in a Henry Miller play, just my favourite kind of playwrights, really. So yeah, that would have been great. Having a regular job in a paid job in a good theatre, doing films, that kind of stuff. But it just didn't happen, And so I don't know. I just thought, this isn't happening. So I need.
So were you going to tons of auditions and?
A few, yeah, but I didn't get an agent either, which was a deterrent. So which made me think, well, maybe I'm not that great, or I don't know what happened. But we did a showcase at a theatre, but I didn't get an agent. So yeah, I eventually got involved with a co-op, which is run by actors. It's a cooperative agency. But again, I didn't get much work through that, and that was a lot of work. It was just it was really interesting. It was this idea. I mean, I've been very interested in this idea about chasing a dream versus the reality. And actually, I loved acting and that, but the working as an actor, it didn't really work out. And I don't know if I wanted that necessarily. I got the two mixed up. I still would enjoy doing it, but the amount of hours that I had to invest in it without any reward, and it became apparent to me that I had to bring in some money, and I still do it occasionally, little bits here and there, but it was actually thinking about my experience in voice classes and really enjoying it and loving the whole approach to voice teaching. It was very physical. You can involve lots of ideas from different disciplines. And I decided then, I'd like to become a voice coach. So I was very lucky that I applied to Central School of Speech and Drama, as it was then known. And I was accepted on the MA for voice studies. So I could then train as a voice teacher, which was great. Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, the training was great, and I was lucky enough to get offered a job. I became head of voice at a London theatre school, and that was very challenging. I mean, when I think back, actually, the whole experience of teaching voice was pretty scary. I remember doing a placement, my first placement, and that was pretty scary, getting in front of the students and having to lead a class for an hour or 2 hours. A lot of preparation, and even with the preparation, you there was always an element of like, fingers crossed, let's hope this goes okay.
What was the fear?
I think it was being there was a real sense of needing to make sure that what you were doing was super useful, and being confident in what you were teaching, and I wasn't. That was the problem. I wasn't confident in what I was teaching because I hadn't taught it before, and I only kind of understood it more in a theoretical way. And I think it only comes with experience of teaching that you start to feel confident. And I had all my notes, and I'd prepare the night before, and I'd go through in my head, and I'd teach this, and I kept referring to my notepad, and yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. And luckily, generally it went okay, but I was exhausted afterwards. Now, when I went to teach at a drama school full time, well, it was actually a part-time job. It wasn't a full-time role, but there was a lot of hours. I started to become a bit more confident then, and started to become a bit more comfortable with what I was teaching. However, it was still financially it wasn't so good either. And again, I found the reality of, I sound a bit lame. I keep giving up on these things. I found the reality of having to do all the preparation. There was a lot of preparation because I think I set myself quite a high standard of what I needed to teach, and I wanted to make sure I was keeping it fresh in a way. So I would do a lot of preparation, and that meant that most of my spare time was spent reading and preparing, and I didn't want to just go over the same old thing. I wanted to feel engaged in what I was teaching. I wanted to feel like I really believed it. I wanted to up my game all the time. So I set myself quite a high bar, but that meant that I was working quite a lot. And then I found it was quite draining, really, and the repetition of teaching 6, 7, 8 hours a day, it's quite hard. And so I don't know. And interestingly, something I found out is that the logical, problem-solving, computery side of my brain felt neglected, and I was a bit surprised by that. It wanted to get its teeth back into the technical stuff. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I ultimately grew a bit disillusioned with it. It could have been because I just went in the deep end, teaching, head of voice at a drama school, and there's a lot of responsibility. But I don't know, I kind of missed a little bit what I'd done before, and I eventually cut my teaching down just to quite a small focus. And I stuck with just some evening classes, and I went back to working in technology, which is what I'd been doing on and off throughout the whole years. I'd been doing acting whilst I was working in technology, then I went to drama school, then I did some acting, then I worked in technology. So, yeah, and I came back, so...
And the transition back was fine?
Yeah, it was something of a relief, really, because I don't know, it's just... I don't know why I didn't adapt too well to the demands of teaching, like getting up very early, doing a warm-up at 9 o'clock. For me, that was quite challenging, and maintaining that energy throughout the day. But thinking back, some of my best memories are around teaching, and some of the rewards, and seeing it work, and being faced with that challenge of self-development for me as a teacher. It was so good. It was valuable. But at the same time, I learned something really valuable in that nothing has to last forever. Even a dream, it could be a temporary thing, and it matures into something else. And that was quite nice to know that, really.
And were you able to accept that, or did you kind of feel like a failure or something?
I have felt like I pursued the wrong thing. And again, that's when the regret engine kicks in, because you think, well, why did I do that? Now, I try to rationalise that, because I say, like, if somebody stays in the same job for 20 years, how is that any worse than going to do something for 2 years, and then doing something for another year, and then going back to do something else? It's a diversion. One of my biggest regrets is that I didn't pursue music, because that's something that I've loved my whole life, and I've tried to make some progress in, and I still do. And
yeah, not too late.
Yeah, well, I'm still doing it, and I was in a band for a while. That was something I did, and I love that, and that'll never go away. I'll do that forever. But I've kind of had to tackle regret head on, because it is quite destructive. The decisions I made back then and the passions I had were totally what was happening at that time. People change, experiences change, and I think it's okay. I always remember a quote by Robert Anton Wilson, he wrote this amazing book called Prometheus Rising. Definitely recommend it. And there's a quote: "Specialization is for insects." And I think, yeah, as human beings, with the limited time we have on this earth, it's okay to go off and try things and come back and try something else and have a revised view. And I in many ways now I celebrate that aspect of myself, that I had the courage, because why would I punish myself to say that I did the wrong thing when I wouldn't be doing if I'd been stuck in the same job for like 10 or 15 years or 20 years? I actually think it was a courageous thing to do. It may not have been the forever thing, but it changed me internally. And that is in some ways just as important as the change in your external circumstances and what you're doing.
And it's still part of what you're doing now, right? Because you're still teaching.
Yeah, and I'm still teaching. And the beauty of what I'm doing now is I have a very focused remit, and I can put so much more into that. And it's so important to me to keep doing that. And I learn every time I do it. I do. It's amazing how each you're talking about signs earlier, and there are some things that come your way, and students that come with ideas like, we wouldn't be doing this, and yeah, I am so pleased that I did what I did, because it's opened up a whole new world of possibilities. It's just that things don't turn out the way you expect them to, which is okay.
Yeah, because they never do.
No,
you
no,
couldn't
no.
possibly imagine anyone couldn't imagine how their life's going to turn out. It's
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, the future is utterly unknown. The future, it just exists in our minds, much like the past, really. But the problem is, as human beings, we do this terrible thing where we revisit the past with our current understanding, and we try to readjust decisions that we made in our past. And that is utterly pointless, because we were different people then, even in small ways, we were just different people. We had a different set of circumstances, and we made a decision based on what we felt was the right thing to do. And that was just what I did at the time. And yeah.
Yeah, it really resonates with me, because being like in finance and whatever, and then like, oh no, actually I want to do this podcast thing. But I had no idea, like I would the same thing. I missed using that part of my brain, and it's like, actually I love building financial models and and I love going to an office. Like, who knew? I really love like having colleagues, having a place to go, like all of that. So it's like, actually, because people kind of project that onto you of like, oh, you're just waiting till it's successful enough so you can only do it full time. And it's like, no, like I don't want, like I want to do all these other things. Like, why can't I? But yeah, I think it's kind of, for me, it's like having more courage to, like, do you find that people are kind of like, oh, why are you teaching as well as working here?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They think it's a bit too much to do both. And it's interesting, like you're saying, that, you just enjoy doing financial models. And this is it. There's this kind of limited view that we should just do one thing, and you just have to do what you enjoy. And I actually really enjoy, I still code a little bit. I've been trying to build a website, get it off the ground for a while. I love using software. Music enables me to kind of marry that, because I use technology. But yeah, no, I think what you're hitting on there is an important thing. It's the feeling that we tell ourselves that we should limit what we do because other people's version of events, or we might look at how it should be done, and that's one of the big lessons I've taken away from my experience is you find your own way. That's the most important thing. And if you enjoy doing a podcast, who knows where it might go. But if you also enjoy doing your work, why not? Why not? You shouldn't cut one thing off because there's a sense that you have to. And you can do both. You can absolutely do both. So I guess I was relating to this. There was the guy called Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU, and I saw this YouTube video where he was talking about don't follow your passion. It's the worst advice anybody can give you. And I thought, that's interesting, but it kind of bothered me. And I thought, well, look, I see people all the time like following passions because it sort of drives us, right? We see something that really drives us. But then I started to think, well, I kind of did that. And maybe I'm proof that he's right. Maybe I shouldn't have done. But then I think, no, perhaps what he means, and I don't want to say what he means, but what it means to me, I think, is that do what you love doing, but don't necessarily get fixated on a goal of becoming that job. I may go back to acting, but it's not a failure that I haven't won an Oscar because I loved acting, so I just got involved in it. I love music. I'm not going to get to number one. I don't want to. I just enjoy doing it. You enjoy doing financial models. You feel good when you're doing it. It's not about the end destination. It is about the process. And I think when I hear him say, "Don't follow your passion," because he qualifies that by saying, you're not going to be, if you want to be a DJ or something, you're not going to be Jay-Z. Right, but if you love DJing, do it, but don't get fixated on being the professional necessarily and making all the money, because that could be a distraction from what you really love doing.
And yeah, that can kill it. Like having, because I think I do that to myself. Like it has to be, it's like a perfectionist thing, or it has to be this, otherwise it's not worthwhile. But it doesn't have to be anything. It's like if you're enjoying and you're,
Right.
you're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting other people. Like you're not, it's how you're choosing to spend your time and live your life. And if you can be self-sufficient as well, which might mean figuring stuff out with, that's why it's funny that you're almost like, it sounds lame about being like actually practical reasons, but it's not. It's like, that's kind of how we have to be responsible for ourselves. Who else is going to be? And like, what's wrong with wanting to live in a like nice place and have whatever, it's like, that's a good thing. It's weird because in the US that's like the only thing that people are focused on, and then I don't know, in some other people talk about selling out or something, but it's like, why? If you want to like make money doing something that you like doing or whatever, or you want to be able to provide for a family or something, it's like, why? What's wrong with that? It's like
exactly
a good thing.
Yeah. And this is where I think it gets back to values. Rather than fixing on goals and destinations, can you just live out your values? And if your value is to be to have a comfortable home and to be able to enjoy what that brings to you, then why not live that out at the same time as doing creative pursuits and other things? You have to. For me, it is at this present. I've got to say, at this present stage of my understanding, if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. But and this is the other thing: it's that we're constantly under a state of change. And at my present state is, I feel that I am able to live out my values, and if anything gets in the way, then I will try and maybe limit that. If I feel that my work is getting in the way of me living out my values, then I might make a change. Or if I recognise that there is a risk associated with something, but I feel like I'm good at it, because once you start getting good at something, things start to grow around it. When you become proficient, you do kind of move into that space, and I think things come your way. But I think, unfortunately, we are more fixed on I want to be the Oscar winner, rather than I'm just going to go and do it. I'm going to take action, and it's the action for me which is this is where it's happening, not the final destination. So, and I think that's what I recognised with my acting. I was loving the acting. I probably wasn't that great at acting. I probably would never have won an Oscar. I look at great actors and I'm like amazed at how they can do it. But at the time, it was something that was part of my value system, and I took it to its conclusion, and then I moved on to something else. And I have no regrets. I try not to. Well, do I have no regrets? I don't. I think I probably do have regrets, but I have tried to reevaluate my relationship to regret. Yes, I probably made some bad choices, but don't we all?
Yeah.
And I'll continue to make bad choices. So that's part of being a human being. And
but as long as you're learning from before.
Yeah. I mean, I've not done it, it's like we're talking here about career choices and relationship choices and, where you move to, things like that. But we're not talking about terrible things. Obviously there are people that should not have done certain things in their lives, but we're talking about just like choices in our life that we decided that took us on different paths. I've had terrible inner dialogue about when I wanted to move to Australia and wishing I had in my early 30s, and I thought, what would my life be like? But that's that terrible inner comparison to the life that you could have, and it's quite destructive, I think, to do that.
Maybe you end up going in your 60s or something.
I might, and great, exactly. So that's it, exactly. And recently I've sort of discovered this idea of radical acceptance, and actually saying, well, instead of agonizing over what I could have done, you say, oh, I fully accept things as they are, and the only thing I can change is what to do next. I can change what I'm doing in the moment. That's where my energy goes. That's where I can make the change. And so the past becomes it's just a thing where I have to fully accept that that's what happened, and that's the choices I made. So
amazing. Oh yeah, we've gone over an hour. Okay, can you just give us some quick voice tips?
Yeah, sorry, we haven't really talked about voice work that very much. Yeah.
Well, we kind of have, because so the course I did was using your voice assertively.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how much we've kind of talked about the values, because that's kind of the definition we came to. That's what assertiveness means, is living in your values.
Yeah, that's right. I struggled to come to a definition of assertiveness when I was given that course. But I think for me, assertiveness is about being able to express yourself according to your values, often in opposition to what might be happening around you. And we do make the distinction between aggressiveness and assertiveness, but as we say in the class, it's not so black and white. There are times when maybe you have to be very assertive. We're all assertive in a way. We all make choices every day that clearly would benefit us and the ones we love, and the things that we care about. But I think often people come to the class and they want to be assertive in ways that they maybe feel that they're not being assertive in, whether it's in the workplace or in relationships or in other choices. So part of that is identifying what your values are, and then thinking about how you can enact those values through action, and what assertiveness means then to continue to live out those values. Now, the great thing about voice work is obviously voice plays a pivotal role in our assertiveness. That's our communication, verbal communication to the world. And here we are doing just that. So as a voice teacher, it's often not that mysterious. You really have to go back to how we vocalize. And we vocalize through an intake of breath, which is triggered by the brain's moving the diaphragm. We expire the breath. The vocal folds come close together. They vibrate. They make a sound which resonates through spaces in our neck and in our head, and it's articulated into sounds, vowels and consonants and whatnot through our articulators, our lips and our tongue, our jaw, etc. So that simple process, unfortunately, we get in the way. We have tension in our shoulders. We have postural issues which might interfere with our breathing. We have shallow breathing. We don't breathe fully. We don't take as much air in as we can. So breath work is important, and voice work starts with physical work. It starts with recognizing the tensions that we hold, and it starts with realigning our posture and feeling a sense of the head just floating to the ceiling, to just try and raise our sense of height and just the sense of looseness in our body. As they say, tension is the enemy of the voice. So we start to kind of loosen up a bit. We start to recognize areas of tension, start to observe, like clenching our jaw or holding our shoulders, and just try and disinhibit that. Make the tension go away. And it's just a sense of not pushing, just like acknowledging it and saying, okay, I want the tension to go away. Now, obviously, there's a lot of physical practices to do this and various bits of work we can do, but one of the things we can do is we can just lie down on the floor and just breathe deeply into our bellies and just see the movement. One of the things that you may notice in the class is often how it's difficult for people to feel movement in their bellies, because they're breathing and they're using their shoulders, which just gets in the way. So just recognize that as you breathe in, your belly moves out, and as you breathe out, your belly moves in and gently supports your breathing. And then we just try and deepen the breath through that very simple process. Sometimes you can count out to try and breathe out a little bit further, and just make sure that the shoulders are not getting involved. So it's really a very gentle process of just getting back in touch with our basic breathing processes. And then we move into making sound and sighing out gently and bringing that into a gentle sound. And just going back to basics, so that we start to think about sound. And there's a really great voice note from a voice teacher that is fantastic called Barbara Hausman. She says voice work is about feeling and not sound. And I keep going back to this. So when you're making sound, say you're doing a hum, you feel the vibration in your chest. And you give yourself more breath, because the breath gives you more power, more volume, more strength of vibration. And it's about starting to fill the sound up, but also not pushing forwards with the head, keeping the head in balance, making sure the back of the neck isn't getting involved, keeping the chest muscle soft, the jaw muscle soft, the tongue nice and easy, and just starting to work with opening and releasing these spaces. So a lot of it really is just centering the body again, getting the posture back to where it should be, removing tension from the upper body, finding out how to breathe again, and then starting to build up the breath, and so you can give yourself more power. So the sound goes from gentle as it gets bigger and you get more power, but matching that with intention to be heard. And as you know, in our course, the course you were involved in recently, we do a lot of work around thinking about what communication is and the effect of changing the listener, who your listener is. So you're less concerned with the destructive thoughts in your head of, are they finding me interesting? Is what I'm saying worthwhile? And you really just think about, why am I communicating? What is your objective in the communication? And getting back to that, and just keeping positive, constructive kind of ideas in your head about why you're communicating. So it's a big thing, the voice work. It starts with the basics. Think about how we speak, get the body to support it, remove bad habits, get away from the bad habits of tension, the bad habits of posture, clenching our jaw, all this kind of stuff, the tension that lives in our bodies. It's about removing that, and then getting back to that basic education of releasing the breath through open spaces, opening the mouth, getting the resonance stronger through finding vibration by humming into our lips, finding vibration into our chest, opening these spaces, and then just being comfortable. I mean, I think one of the most telling exercises that we did in the class is when we have people speaking with loud music and headphones, and the fullness of that sound, it's big and it's full and it's more resonant, and it highlights to me that what we have is a limit as to the perception of our voices. And if we don't hear our voices, suddenly we put all of this voice work into play. But the minute we turn the sound off and people hear their voices at their own level, a wall comes up and they pull back. And this is what voice work's about. It's about removing that wall so you can do this naturally and release that voice. Because if you think about it, as babies, infants, small children, the power and the stamina they have, it's remarkable. But as adults, all the bad habits, the sense of self-consciousness, unfortunately that becomes kind of embodied within us, and it locks us away. And so we're trying to open that, which I think maybe ties it in with what we were talking about earlier with the mental walls also. So voice work is a physical process of releasing it, but it's also a mental process, and it's about reducing the limits on what's happened over the years.
My favorite exercise was the turnaround exercise. That just so it's like everyone has their back against the wall. You have to try and make people turn around just using the words turn around. And it was so interesting how changing the way you're saying it, like the emphasis or the pitch or the volume, and how different people respond to different things. But then it makes you realize, like, wow, your voice actually has the power to persuade someone to do something or to not do something. And it's like, wow, like I'm carrying this power. That like blew my mind, because it's like, especially with thinking about the future and stuff like that, it's like, no, actually you have control over these things. Yeah, I think I told you, it was like I used that. Then the next day I think I was asking for a pay increase or something. And it was like, actually, it's not like all set. It's like the way I communicate this, like really.
Absolutely.
and not because we think about the content and the words, but it's literally like the tone matters and things like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, that is a really nice exercise, because what you're doing is you have a very simple objective. Somebody's got their back to you, and all you can say is turn around, and they have to feel like they should turn around. So you have a very simple objective, and you have a very direct consequence of the success of that communication. And all you can do is play with those two words, turn around, and try all the different ways of speaking it. So it kind of distills it in a very simple way. And when in reality, this is what we're doing. In the moment, we just have the word, and dictionary definition of the word aside, in the moment, when the word is full and expressed, and we have a real connection with it, this is where we get a bit woo-woo. But when you are really expressing your personal meaning and your personal intention through that word, that's when it starts to come to life. And that's when people start to feel affected by it. That's a kind of a magical process. So the words come alive, and you send them out as messengers, and they land, and people feel what you're feeling. That's that magical process of verbal communication. And this is why the spoken word, the human voice, is such an extraordinary thing, because words have such depth, and we forget that, because we live in a society where it's really about data exchange, it's rapid communication. But when you go back to a word and what it means personally, and how you can just really be in the moment and express that and explore it, then it starts to reveal itself to you in detail and depth and colour and substance, and that's what we're aiming for here, to get back to that joy of the word, and forget about the negative voices of you're too loud, or you're too quiet, or they're not interested in all these things, your appearance or whatever. You just getting into the moment means so many things in so many different disciplines, and being in the moment with voice work is giving that word your full imagination, your full intention, full breath, released body, and you can feel it yourself. You can surprise yourself with the words. And this is why if you see a great performance, you're affected by it, because they are there. They're not racing through it. They're really giving it so much detail, and that's what I think is one of the great joys of voice work, where you kind of rediscover communication through voice, through the body.
Can you just, before we wrap up, I have 3 last questions, quick ones to ask, but can you do your demonstration of what your voice used to sound like? And how you changed it?
Yeah, I will. So the background here is that I thought people would comment on my voice, and this is probably something we didn't discuss, but part of my journey into voice work is people would comment on my voice and say, "Oh, you got a good voice, got an interesting voice," and so my voice became part of my identity. But actually, when I started voice training, I was a bit overconfident, really, because I realised that. So I had quite what you'd call a pharyngeal, like a chest resonant voice. It was kind of withdrawn. So I'd probably talk a bit more like this, really. It was in my chest, and it was a bit held back. It was deep. People would think, "Oh, interesting," but it was held back, and it was pretty, down here. So then I did voice training, and then one of the parts of it was to develop the sense of resonating more in the mouth and sending the sound out with a bit more clarity. So I'd keep the bassy, rooty sound down here, but I would develop the oral projection, and so that transformed it to being more clear, and that was demonstrated to me that it does work. The voice is the instrument analogy with the voice is important, I think, because it is very much an instrument, but it's a very sophisticated instrument. It's an instrument that can change shape and size But similar to a wind instrument, it has a reed with the vocal folds, it vibrates. It has open chambers where it resonates. We can slide the pitch up and down. But what I recognise as people come to the classes is that they're playing a quarter of that instrument, and they've set limits, whether it's through how resonant they are, which resonant spaces they have access to. They might just be speaking up here. They might just be using a little bit of resonance up here, or it's all down here, the manly voice. So we're trying to open up access to all of these different resonant spaces. More pitch. I used to speak pretty much down here like this. But now I'm trying to explore more of the pitch and the expression, the richness of it, more expression that it gives me. It catches people's attention, and it's really just about that. How can I expand my voice to be a little bit more impactful? But people are afraid because it's change, especially around the voice, is quite significant. One of the things that people come to the class with, and it's a real shame because they get a lot of feedback from their peers or their family about their voices, as occasionally they'll be like, "Oh, you're very quiet, you mumble," things like that. It's real shit. It sticks with people because they become very self-conscious, and I want people to ignore that feedback because maybe that person didn't hear them for whatever reason, but it's quite damaging, that kind of feedback, and it's a bit insensitive, it's clumsy. And I think, unfortunately, it makes people quite self-conscious. And I have people coming to my classes that have big voices, but they're self-conscious. And I want to throw that feedback out of the window and say, no. Your voice is really great as it is. It's amazing what it's doing, but there's more. There's more spaces. There's doors to open, more expression, more forgiveness. I still stammer over the words, but I have learned not to beat myself up about it. It's okay to do those things, but there's more exploration, and it can carry on and on and on. I still find myself tensing in my shoulders. I still find myself pushing my head forwards when I'm in a hurry, as if it's gonna help. But it's just a bit of awareness, and then you kind of bring yourself back to that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to walk from my legs more. I'm going to not push myself and put tension in my shoulders. But yeah, it's really deconditioning a lot of this, and to open up that wonderful instrument that we carry around with us. And you hear it in the classes when people start to really relax and get more free, and their voices become fuller. And the really interesting thing is when people say, "Wow, I suddenly heard that word in a way I hadn't." And we have to remember is each of us have the ability to communicate words like no other person. It's unique as our fingerprints. The way you say something is unique to you, and that's something to be celebrated. It's amazing because you have the power then to express words in a way that no one else will have heard it before. And having that power is something amazing. So cast aside all of the reasons to not do it and the barriers, and just explore what the voice is capable of.
Yeah, it's so cool. Okay, I'm so excited for my voice to continue to change on this podcast, and to be I've been doing the work. I guess to also speak more fluently, which is probably my thing. But anyway.
Well, I mean, again, I always say that where you are now is a good place. It's just like learning a musical instrument. There's always more. There's always more pieces. There's more you can add lyricism to the way we speak. We can explore. Some people like to try accents. We like to try different resonant spaces. We like experiment with breath work to fill the space with more volume, and all of these kind of things. But for me, fundamentally, what I do, even today, I'm ordering a coffee in a busy coffee shop, and there's a lot of background noise. For a lot of people, it's quite disheartening when people say sorry. They feel disheartened because they think, "Oh no, my voice is failing me again," and the demons kick in, and the negative messaging which we attach ourselves to, which we shouldn't, because that's not useful. So I've just got some basic technique where I think, right, I'm going to give myself a bit more breath. I'm going to use my belly to support me. I'm going to breathe deep, and I'm going to bring the air out from my belly, and I'm going to say, "Oh yeah, can I have a coffee, please?" And I'm just going to apply that to use a bit more volume. I'm going to slow down a little bit, so the vowels have a bit more space, because that's where the resonance lives, in the vowels. So people will hear that with a bit more clarity. So slow down a little bit, more breath for a bit more volume, and just target who I'm listening to and recognize that that's, just a few basic techniques can help. And not to be afraid. It can feel like a big deal doing that, but the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and the more it seems normal. It's crazy for me that our vocal development ends with us learning how to talk. Then that's it. We don't go back to it. But there's so much more to explore, so much more to open up. It's like we do it with our bodies. We go to the gym. We run, we do exercise, or we do yoga, or, we do all of these like disciplines to develop our bodies. But our voice, no, it just sits there. So luckily, there's training available, and it makes a difference. So yeah, I think that more people should do it, but it is a bit harder to do because people are reluctant to make noise. Publicly, like in the shared environments, it's quite exposing, but it's just because it's societally it's not normal. I think in different cultures they have different relationships with their voices, different acceptabilities of volume and so on. But it's there for the taking, and it's just through voice work that we can start to discover more and it just opens up the possibilities of your expression. So yeah.
Okay, last 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay grounded?
How do I stay grounded? You mean physically, mentally, both? A good question. Deliberately open-ended, I suspect. I stay grounded, I think, by through gratitude, through really trying to exercise gratitude through the things that I have. Because fretting about the things that I don't can really steal me away into a place that I don't feel grounded. I feel grounded through keeping my body in use, and through getting enough sleep, and through drinking enough water. So just a few basics there. And I think, keeping good friends who are good for me, that helps me feel grounded.
Is there a book that's had a big impact on you? You've mentioned a couple, but...
Yeah, that is a really good question. I can list so many. What's the book that's had a big impact on me? Wow. I think... obviously some of the occult books were, talking about magic as a way of changing your mind, but let's narrow it down to one book. There was a book, The Road Less Travelled by M. Scott Peck, that really had a big effect on how I kind of viewed the idea of like good and evil. I know these are big words, but just in terms of chaos and focus. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Oh, sorry, I'm going to list a load of books here. That's not what the question was. That's terrible. I very recently read. There was a book called Compassion and Self-Hate, which I thought was a great book by Theodore Rubin, which really had an effect on acknowledging that where I am right now is a great place to be. That kind of stuff. The Fiction of J.G. Ballard, because it just paints a reality which I absolutely love. Shall I stop now?
I mean, if there's another one you're desperate to say.
The Happiness Trap was a good one. That was quite influential, and because it came into my teaching, and I discovered acceptance and commitment therapy. Recently, I found the books by Sally Winston and Martin Seif. They are doing books on anxiety, which I found extremely useful. But yeah, but I just can't get enough. I have to say, a lot of self-help books, not that useful. I know this is blasphemy, but you have to take it. You feel good whilst you're reading it, but the longevity of what you're being taught cannot always follow through. So the books where I've found utility and I've been able to carry them into my life have been really good, but they are few and far between. You know.
Yeah, I wonder if you're talking about, I think some of the thing I see is people write a book based on something that worked in their life, but and then they're prescribing it to everyone. But it's like, that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone else. Whereas that's why I'm more interested doing this format where it's like we get to hear about your life, and that might really resonate with some people. But it's not like you're sitting here saying, here's how you figure out life, do X, Y, and Z. Because, and I feel like some of self-help books are kind of that category.
I think so, yeah. And I think what a lot of self-help books have practical advice at quite a superficial level about, like productivity books, for example, about, you know, how to develop new habits or how to arrange your day and all that kind of stuff. Which may work for some, like you say, not for others. But I think what they're missing is the motivation to do things and how you actually instill motivation. And that's the hard thing. Because you can read something and go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, you can't go away and then put it into practice. And the good books are the things which I think a penny drops and you go, oh right, okay, I can change myself a little bit doing this. And they are few and far between. You know, if you go to the self-help section, there will be some, but you have to be aware that it's going to be, some of them are too long, those books, and they're written to fill a book. Some of them are great, you know. I mean, the more kind of research-based ones, the more kind of fact-based ones can appeal to me because there's something there which clearly is proven to work. But again, putting these things into practice is kind of hard. We all know mindfulness is good for you, but isn't it hard to do even 10 minutes a day? It's pretty tough. So how do you put that book down and then put that into practice?
Okay, last question. What 3 words describe the best version of you?
Okay, so 3 words to describe the best version of me. This is where I would ask you to pause the recording and give me 45 minutes to think about it. Maybe decisive would be one of those words. Okay, I think compassionate, focused, and creative. I'll stop there.
Great.
How about you? Do you get asked that question?
Yeah, and I feel like it changes every time. I think it's like, I don't know what I say. I think the first time I was like honest, brave, and kind maybe, or something like that. I don't know. But then I was like, I don't know. I'm always honest. I can't really help that. So that's not really... Because I'm like, is the question like who you aspire to, you know, when you turn up as the best version of yourself? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. No, they're good ones though. I mean, I think that this is the thing. I think it relates to self-compassion. Those questions like that really reflect where you are right now at this present moment. And we have to celebrate that. And if I ask you this in an hour, it's probably going to be different. And I think this is the thing. We as people, we tend to fix things as if they're unchanging. And you know, like the cliche goes, change is the only constant. So it's great to hear, like in the moment, what how you feel, what are important to you. but that's 3 words from thousands, and then I'd be fascinated to hear what it is tomorrow and the day after that, because it starts to reveal what's going on inside. So, but I think it's a good question though, because it does make you think about what your values are. And one thing that I've learnt not to do is to go over these questions again and again and think, damn, I should have answered that way, because that is one of those non-productive things about going back to the past and then saying, right, this is what I should have done, because that just provokes anxiety, and it's absolutely futile. So that's why I think we should just celebrate that was that answer there and then carry on with how the present moment unfolds in front of us.
Definitely. Okay, thanks so much. Wait, where can people find you if you want them to be able to find you, or find like voice resources?
That's a really good question. I did have a website, Ian Taylor Voice, but it hasn't been alive. I might have to resurrect it. Before the podcast comes out. I teach at the City Lit. I teach Use Your Voice Assertively, but only once a year. It starts in September. But yeah, I think I don't have much of a presence online, and I need to fix that. And I don't have much of a social media presence either. But I think it's time to resurrect my website. So if people did want to get in touch, iantaylorvoice.co.uk or .com, I can't remember that. It's been a while. I do need to pay more attention to my presence. I am hoping to put some of my training out there soon, and there is more to come online wise. But I'm a bit superstitious. If I tell people my plans, they won't happen. So,
okay, so watch this space.
Watch this space, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, feel free to share it with someone. And also, a random 23-year-old just messaged me on Instagram and told me he found the podcast through the algorithm. So it actually does help if you review the podcast and subscribe or follow. And then you get to find out about future episodes as well. Review or rate, you know what I mean. Anyway, it would truly make my day. So thank you in advance.